Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for May 24th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and also here are Ralph Kohler, who will start off the discussion and is sharing their screen, and Scott and Simo Helston. Go ahead, Ralph.
We are looking at issue number 331817. Improve the categories filter type in context to the rest of the filter component UI. That's an issue I've created a while ago. I quickly run you through the problem that is outlined in the issue summary, and then I quickly present the current proposed resolution, where Chris wanted another feedback for. Okay, with the current UI, the filter UI has a few problems around categories as listed in the issue summary. It is not directly apparent based on the UI that categories are an actual filter type like development status, maintenance status, and security advisory coverage. The only clue is that selected categories are shown as filter chips. If you take, for example, then you see automation is getting added. To illustrate the disconnect, me personally always thought, shouldn't the filter chips and the category chips have different colors? And technically, they are different. The chips for the three others are either or, while categories, each of those, basically, if you take that active, it's either show all or it's got it added, or if then it got removed. But for categories, each category adds a new chip. Then the filter and sort options are sort of intertwined. If we take a look at mobile, you first have basically the search, then you have the filter button, which is a toggle. And as you can see, the information getting exposed is further down the screen. Then you have basically the chips, then the sort by option. Then you get to the filter settings when the filter button is toggled. Then you get to the search results, the number of results. Then, per default, a collapsed filter categories section, and then you get to the actual results. That is the order. And in contrast, on desktop, the search, then you have the filter button, then you have the filter chips, then the sort by, all wrapped around in that grayish, let's call it field set, that they belong together. And underneath, when toggled, you have those three options. Then you get the results, and then completely disconnected from those filters, from the filter section, you have the filter categories. One workaround that was suggested to at least illustrate it a bit was changing the title from categories to filter categories, but that is also not that the ideal term there. And yeah, that filter section is filter category section is basically one column next to basically the search results. So the lines are blurring.
Okay, but before you go any further, Ralph,
Yeah.
I want to point out Aaron McHale has joined us. And does anyone have questions about the context of this? Are we all familiar with the project browser and the various options it provides, or do you have questions at this point?
I'm familiar with this.
Okay, and we get a thumbs up from Aaron. Okay, thanks, Ralph. Go ahead.
Okay, and it has to be noted, it is good to have both filter and sort in close proximity, but having the sort option within that grayish field set for filters, and at the same time having the categories which are actually displayed separately underneath right next to the search result is ambiguous and potentially confusing. And then category terms are, as also been noted, those category terms are set on a per source basis. If you take a look here, you have Drupal.org. You have that kind of that number of categories, and if you go to the Drupal core, you have the categories everybody knows: core, core experimental, and so forth. But taking a look at the others, those development status, maintenance status, security are set globally, basically. And yeah, those three make sense for basically Drupal.org, the modules, but for Drupal core, they are implicit and a given anyway. Okay, that's basically the status quo. Now to the proposed resolution, which is outlined in issue number, comment number, 7. It's mainly informed by a webinar by Smashing Magazine on Search UX, and the main 2 takeaways that apply to, in that context, to the project browser is: first, filters should be above search results. When filters appear in the sidebar right next to the search results, this might cause layout shifts, because in case if you search for something, let's say ECA, and you change, then it gets busy and it's distracting. If you have the focus there, you always have something happening next to you. Instead, if the filtering and the set of the filter happens above, then it isn't much of a problem. And second, search filtering and sorting are interconnected. Users often perceive them as part of one single task. But if you take a more granular look at the apparently single task, it is always you first search, then you filter, and then you potentially also sort. And with the current UI, as previously outlined, those 3 steps are blurred and sort of intertwined. During the meeting, Vitaly demonstrated 2 potential options to tackle this. The first one is from a workshop at the European Union, which is, one second, I only have a screenshot because this is a non-existent page yet, or the solution looks different at the moment there. That is basically moving everything in a single line. It's in line. Basically, you have your search field, and then you have the 3 main filter options: authors, language, and year, and each is basically a multi-select field. On one hand, that approach has one plus aside that multi-select, because it also tackles the recommendation of the length of the search field. Because at the moment, if you take a look at that, it's spanning across the whole viewport. And if you expand the page and the window on, for example, a widescreen monitor, in my case, 36 inches, then it gets even longer. And the recommendation by Smashing Magazine was basically on mobile, have that field around 45 characters, and on desktop around 60-ish. So on mobile, on desktop, that solution would work and it would be compact. But on mobile, cramming those 3 categories, the search button and the search field within one line, might not work. That is one approach. And the other example Vitaly provided, it's one that is testable. Okay, the one detail that has to be collapsed, I dislike, but basically having a search field spanning across the width available, and then having right underneath the list of categories, as in that case by specialty, article category, and by date. And That way, it would be compact and pretty straightforward. Details to note, it also is, it has to be noted that the height of that select field should be basically, we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It should be always not full numbers, like 8 units high. It should be always a half, meaning in that case 8.5. That way it is directly apparent in case someone is hiding the slider that there are more, and that this list is scrollable. And the other suggestion is that it's not implanted here, to have sort of an apply button, meaning in Project Browser at the moment, it's always a redraw here. And if you select that, yeah, if you here take a look here, it's annoying that way. But if you select all the categories you want to go for and then apply, it is more easy on basically requests as well as a better user experience. Problem is, I see at the moment for development status, maintenance status, security advisory, it works to display the selected choice, but in the context of categories, if you select more than one, as already illustrated here, they're doing basically infectious diseases and then MEDI and then concatenate. And that's, yeah, suboptimal, let's call it that way. Yeah, that is basically the current proposed resolution.
Okay, first, any questions? And I see Afar Shal has also joined us. Any comments on the suggested fix?
Just one thing that kind of immediately came to my mind, that at Helsinki University on some forms we expand the input field when more categories are selected, and then it kind of changes the layout, and I don't like that. So it's kind of, but it does show all the selected items.
So are you talking about the current way it works, or the
Like from this New England Journal of Medicine. So when we have those 3 dots there, so in like currently at some searches at Helsinki University, we have so that it kind of expands the input area to be able to show all the items, but that's also not so nice.
Right. I think, the problem with the current design is that it does take up so much space. I noticed that if I'm using the new navigation module with the navigation on the left sidebar, between that and the categories, there isn't much room for the actual modules, which is a bad thing. So making it take up less space by hiding it until you click on it seems like an advantage for that reason. I think also including it with the other filter options is a big plus, a big advantage for the proposed solution. And I guess the idea that goes along with that is that if you are going to include it with the other filters, then because it takes up so much space, you make it appear in a modal. So anyone want to go ahead?
Yeah, one question is, how much we can optimize that? Like how can we have good recommendations for search results, or do we have to rely on that it's either alphabetical or just if we can have like a meaningful, like good search results from just a keyword on that first field, then I think it would be great to just have those filters hidden at first until the user decides to open them, because so that it's not like then it would have a like a good suggestions per keyword, and then the kind of refining the search results would come later, so that it would be easiest to use, I think, for like quick to use. And if somebody knows the name of the module, then it also would be quicker.
So basically improve the quality of the search results, and then the other options for filtering become less important. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, and one comment in regards of the quality of the search results. At the moment, it is using just a mock, and you also don't have the option for sort by relevancy. There will be the move to the endpoint on Drupal.org, and then you will have, I'm not sure, I'm blanking right now on the technology behind which
Solar.
server. Is it Solar or
I think
was
so.
it the other? Yeah. Anyway, but the search results at the moment are not representative, as well as the sort options at all, and they will be re-evaluated, and the search quality will also be evaluated as soon as it will be moved over to Drupal.org. So that will change significantly.
Okay, I've put into the chat a link to my site, and maybe Ralph, you could do the same. Mine has the Umami demo profile and the navigation module, and the project browser installed. Another link I'd like to share. I saw a presentation at MidCamp, I think. And this is a recently added module called Search Web Components. Thanks, Ralph. And so this is a developer. I think Kyle is his actual name. Control Adel is their username. And this is someone who's had some experience implementing search on a bunch of different projects, and is trying to separate out some of the the common tasks, basically the design of the search page. And we might get some inspiration from the recommendations here in this module. And it's also possible that some of the components could actually be used in Project Browser. I don't know how feasible that is, but it might be worth looking at. And the idea is that, every time we implement search, we go through the same work. I see in the chat, Offer says web components for the win. And this, the project browser page basically is a search page. As we were just saying, the long-term goal is to have it be supplied by Solar, which is a very common use case of the Search Web Components module. So we might get some inspiration there.
guess the point to make about solar is, of course, that's host dependent as much as anything else.
What do you mean by that?
Well, hosting has to have a solar instance, right? Drupal doesn't come out of the box with solar. That's the #1 problem, right?
Oh, that's true. But for the project browser, we're going to be getting the data from Drupal.org, and Drupal, the Drupal Association will arrange a Solr server.
Okay.
That gives us the data.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, as opposed to the Search Web Components module, which
I thought it would be the
can be
site,
used with Solr,
the
but that
actual
would
site
be
instance searching the JSON database of what the project browser is providing. I misunderstood that.
okay. So Ralph, maybe go back to the project browser screen.
I have a question. What was the process of deciding to keep that filter categories always open? It's a details element and it has like it has the summary
It's because
hidden.
it's like a table header, right? Like that's gray thing is a table header with functionality in it, and then it's the table of things that it's dropping open.
Yeah, because I was thinking it would, to me, like my first instinct would be to have it as a details element that can be opened and closed, and then you will have more space for the
It is not
more
open per
use.
default.
Like the legend of a field set or the summary of the details is the line of pills. That's what they're coming from in that respect.
Yeah, I guess in the mobile display, you can expand and collapse the filter categories. As you say, it's a details element. And I think Ralph showed us that earlier.
Two control points at that point, yeah.
And in desktop, you wouldn't gain anything by collapsing it because it's still taking up the same amount of width. You just have a lot of white space underneath it. Scott, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I just want to comment on sort of the mock-up design where they had the search with the new data list drop-down options. So the first one, yes, this one. So this looks good. I like the data list. The conversion from all the elements to this data list thing is really good, of course, because that's going to allow for response to change. Like, so this top line, of course, could flow to the first line and small breakpoint. These items could fall underneath, and that's really good. Is this recommending that we get rid of the pills effect? Because on the second item, where it shows that you select a bunch of things and the title gets too long, we get into ... right? Are they recommending that you don't use pills when you have that kind of selection then? Because the pills and people like pills. They like to be able to get out of the things they picked more quickly, right? So the combination of the two ideas I don't think is bad still. I guess that's what...
To answer, personally, I've considered removing those chips or pills the more clean approach and less overwhelming. But yeah, you have a point that quickly refining and removing one of the pills might be, yeah.
If the pills
An
were
option.
themselves opened into a details element that could be controlled by the user, so that if they were too much, at least they could close it up and get it out of their space, their headspace, continue using the page.
Yeah, might be a point to consider. I agree.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. So rather timing wise, it's kind of interesting because at the University of Edinburgh, we've been doing a lot of research at the moment around a future sort of search experience for degree programs. And so a lot of the other search experience we've looked at, there's like a lot of common themes. And so things like what you tend to find and what our prototypes have come to is basically you have the filtering as a panel down the right side, and each filter is like you have like a box with the filter options in it, and on mobile it collapses down to a single button, and you click the button and it opens the model, and you can select your filters and then confirm what you want. So that pattern is kind of how we've shown us as work that I guess would be the most successful one or the most common one. And I believe we're not, I don't know if we're using the pills as such for the refine results, like when you're showing, but certainly having a visible area at the top where you can see, okay, these are all the filters that are applied. And full disclosure, I wasn't involved in any of the research. Like we have some really great user researchers and people who do that, but from the outputs, that's kind of what we're going with. So like, yeah, I would, based on that, I'd sort of recommend it. And I could see why it makes more sense to have all the filters down the right side, because like the categories being on the left side is not really, I don't know if that's like great, because you want the most important information to be on the left side, based on people that read from top to bottom, left to right. And I think having filters is something that you do, and then you refine the results, and then you want to see the results. I'm also not sure like how. I think as well the problem with categories is that the user, there has to be a level of like trust that the user has that the categories are going to be in any way useful. I think again in research with students, for instance, what we see is a lot of them say, I just want to see all the results, right? Basically they don't trust that the filtering is like going to show them what they actually want. So I would question whether we even should, like, whether we need to show all those categories. I wonder what the usefulness of that is to people, because again, like, yeah, it's our groupings. It's what we've said. These are the categories. So yeah, that's some insight there that might be useful.
Go ahead, Ralph.
With the too many windows open. Yeah, with the approach of those select fields, you would also add the basically all, in that case, all authors, and in consequence, it would be similar for categories, all categories checkbox, and that way it could be, in air quotes, deactivated filtering by categories. And because at the moment it's just implicit, if you don't check any checkbox, then you basically search all categories. That is also debatable.
Yeah,
and covers basically the point Aaron said again.
And that also gets back to a point you brought up earlier, that currently we have the category chips in the same row. I guess multiple rows are possible. The same row as the other filters, and I think that's confusing. As you said, the other filters are toggles, either all or restrict to actively maintained, all are covered by security policy. And yeah, I think instead of trying to make them visually distinct, I would put those filters in one details element and put the categories in another details element, and then have the chips inside the details. Or at least I would have them grouped separately. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. Yeah, it's the thing is, like, I think Ralph, you mentioned this at the start. There's like a complete disconnect visually between like those filters and the categories. Yet they do this. They form part of the same experience. Like you're filtering. Like categories are just another filter, and it's very weird that they're like in a completely, categories are in a completely different place from the other filters. I think that's not a great. I don't know if that's a great pattern. The other thing, I'm just like looking at this, like the interface just feels very visually busy, very kind of almost like cluttered in some ways. Like there's just a lot of like visual information going on here, and it sort of makes me a little bit anxious looking at it because I'm like, that's a lot of information to digest, like all at once. And so yeah, I don't know if that's again a symptom of the fact that like making it maybe less like maybe having the categories not visible might be better. Not sure, but just even within the individual cards, there's like a lot of different pieces of information, a lot of visual distinction going on that's making it feel quite overwhelming, I guess.
So Aaron, my suggestion was to put the chips inside the details element and only show them when the filters button is toggled. So that would help reduce the visual clutter. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think the advantage of having them outside of the detail element is that it's clear that the search results you're seeing they're being influenced by those filters. You can almost get a summary. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if hiding the filters that are being applied is better. Yeah, I do wonder. I think I'm more. My feeling is that like having not having all the categories there might be, and also not having them like all expanded because, like I was saying, we don't really know how helpful those are to people, and also like there's a lot of categories. Like again, just thinking about it, that's a lot of like visual information right there on the screen next to all those modules. So should those be also hidden, maybe?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what Ralph's proposal will do. It'll move it out of that left sidebar and show it in a modal, right? When you expand the categories like this.
And that's
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
Simo, do you want to ask what you put in the chat?
No, this is more about the issue we were looking at. If we don't have them displayed, those categories that are selected, I think it would be helpful to show that you have this and this many categories selected, and then you can open and see what they are. So it would have information about that there are filters in place, and also how many, maybe like you have like maybe 5 categories selected or something like that. But the thing I wrote on the chat is in the future, will the user be able to click on the categories on the cards to refine search? That's something I was actually trying to do on that Umami site to see if I can filter by those, because I'm used to clicking those, and also that plus more, but I think these are kind of not ready.
You're
yet.
saying that because they look like it's a button at the same time, they're the pills and it looks like a button. So you'd think I can click on that and filter it.
Yeah. So that if I want to look at just, if I first choose from the list accessibility, and then I want to then refine it to have to modules that have accessibility and content. So I could maybe click on editorially and click on the content, so it would kind of add that to the filters. So that's what I would expect, seeing it like that. And also some of those have that +1 more or +4 more or something like that. So that would be, I would expect that to be clickable so that it would show those. But Is it Ralph or Aaron next?
I think I was next.
Yeah.
Just one comment to your suggestion, Simo. I wondered that as well, but my expectation clicking on, for example, access control wouldn't be that it will be added to basically the list of already selected filter categories, but instead my expectation would be rather to limit it only to, for example, in that regard, access control. I won't only look at the results for access control to find others that way. It would be not necessarily my expectation that it would be a +1. And in addition to that, and maybe that should be communicated on the click in some way. I'm not sure how, but in general, the idea, a +1 from my end. And one comment I wanted to make before, from my point of view, I would technically remove the details element like it's currently up there, and I would just display as is those, in our case, 4 filter types, and don't hide anything. And in regards of Simo's suggestion, instead of concatenating, maybe for categories where it's impossible to display all the selected ones, simply just display the count is maybe a good compromise to tackle it. So basically 3 categories are selected or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same thing as you, Ralph, that if I could click on the category in a pill, it would show only that category. And Scott asked in the chat, if the inner pill on the card had its own checkbox. And Simo says, I thought filtering would show only the ones that have all selected categories, but it seems to filter any of the selected. Yes. And that's a big difference between the category filter and the other filters. That if no categories are selected, there's no filter. As soon as you select one, it restricts to just that. If you select 4, it shows those 4. And that's part of the reason that I think they should be grouped separately from the other filters. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. I think it I do sort of like the example you gave there, Ralph. I guess it's sort of like slightly less visually cluttered feeling. I think in the research that we saw with students, with filtering, the expectation is how the categories work, where like the more filters you add in a given group, the more you see. Obviously with the other filters we have here, they're kind of like radio buttons. So to me, I sort of understand that I can select one of these but not both. Then again, maybe those should be, actually, Ralph, can you expand the filter thing? Like, yeah, if we go with the other pattern, I think you could have like, we almost don't need the show all, because showing all is just nothing applied. So like, why do we have, I don't know. There's like, I guess, I assume there's going to be more things under like maintenance status, development status, but I just feel the show all is like, if those were just checkboxes, like why don't we just have a status, you know?
Actually, I think a decision was made to just have the 2 options, all are maintained. And maintained is actually an aggregation of 2 or 3 of the possible statuses that a project can have.
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, it's weird having like maintained and show all. Like I feel like, or like, you know, active and show all. Because like those could just be checkboxes. Like why are the radio buttons? Like it's either if it's one option or the other, it's either they're maintained or not maintained, is the way my brain is like understanding that. But the main point I wanted to make, which was not that, but is we were talking about those pills within the result, the individual result. I'm also sort of wondering like what value those are adding being there. Like you can obviously click in because what either if there's a lot of categories for a given one, like you either see I don't know if there's an example there where there's like lots of one with lots of categories.
I think the plan is to restrict the number of categories that a project can have.
Yeah.
The maximum number is 3 categories, and the first category is basically the main category, so it's a weighted list basically.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like I guess I can see value in it. I feel like part of me feels like we just need some user research into this to figure out like what do users expect, because it's hard to say, I think, whether those are useful having those there, because what they do having them there like goes back to my point about this feels very visually cluttered. Like there's a lot of visual information going on, and I think removing those, if they don't add much value there, removing those would be helpful. Because either if you've already filtered, because this is what I'm thinking, if you've already filtered by categories, you know the categories you've selected, so you don't need to see those. If you haven't filtered by a category, you're probably searching by a term, because most people aren't going through the entire catalog. So if you're searching for something, you're looking for a specific thing, like you're searching for like, I don't know, like something like the name of a module, or you know roughly what the name. So you're not really searching for a category as such. So I can't think of a situation where displaying those categories is not a huge amount of value, because again, like the other thing, how do we even know whether users would trust those categories? Because those categories are one or more person's interpretation of how this is grouped. Like personally, I don't know if I trust those groupings. I'd rather like use more granular ways of like finding things. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so you're bringing up a lot of related issues, and I think that for the current issue, we don't want to discuss what information is on the cards. We want to focus on where to put the facet or the filter for categories. And I do know that a lot of work has been put into the categories, and I don't want to give up on it too easily. I guess your default position seems to be that users won't trust them unless they have a reason to trust them.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not saying, because I know myself that a lot of work has gone into it. I've seen some of that work, and it is, I know a lot of attention's gone into it. So I'm not saying it hasn't. What I'm saying is like from the research I've seen with people, like people will not instinctively trust that categorization.
Okay.
Like they will think, what if there is something missing here? Or they because they're not the ones who've categorized this. So we can do we might have the best categories ever, we might have like the best group, we might be so confident, but that doesn't mean our users are, you know? So then you think, well, how useful are those categories to begin with?
Okay. Ralph, go ahead.
Just one brief comment about those categories. I consider them important, but I completely support your point about in the context of the card, they are rather a distraction, meaning not really helpful there. So they don't add any benefit. Basically, or if you go onto a card and that, for example, access onto the access control bridge, there you have the category. But on the card itself, as you said, you already set a context in the filter, so it is not really necessary to display it there. It's basically, it's breaking the flow, and the main detail, it goes off topic here, but the main goal should be to make those cards as scannable, easy scannable as possible. And at the moment, it is not really. And as you can see, you have a inconsistent flow across. For example, one module has a longer name as the other, therefore it becomes two-lined, then the position of the paragraphs differs, and so forth. And that way, yeah, that is the one thing that Vitaly also emphasized from their research, is those cards should be as easily and as consistent as possible.
Ralph, could you show us the list view for a second?
A list view, yeah, that's an option.
Wonder if that's any easier to scan.
No, it is not. It's even harder to scan because the line length gets longer than 80 characters, which should be the goal, and makes it even more difficult and challenging.
Okay. Scott, go ahead.
This is a good example of desktop first design being the problem, right? Like this is even on a ultra wide breakpoint over 1200 characters should be 2 columns to make that readable, right? The first thing you were talking about in the grid view, of course, is like that could be addressed with CSS, Flexbox. They could make, keep the header for each cube consistently spaced. Like those are things that could be addressed with front end alone. I think I just wanted to comment on that, right? But overall, yeah, I think this is the problem with desktop design first rather than mobile and responsive ready.
I think list is supposed to have a lot of content stack on top so that you can browse it quickly, but here the list here, it only kind of reduces the height of the card and doesn't really make it as a kind of simple list.
Okay. Ralph, say what you want,
Yeah.
and then I think we have to try to wrap up and come up with some recommendations.
Just a brief comment in regards of the list, because basically the list view is just a rearrangement slightly of the grid view. It's still that card. And in regards of scannability, my recommended take would rather be a similar approach taken for the media. There you have basically on the list view an actual list in the table view, and that way if you have columns, it would tackle the length of the description. Of too long description, you could also add columns for the different filter types and so forth, could filter and sort by them. And on the other hand, on the grid view, you could just use the cards, and that way and my main point about list view, for my expectations, it should be 1 line high tops, and in that way it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 lines high. So, but yeah, it's also slightly off topic.
Yeah, it's out of scope for the current issue, but you get a thumbs up from Simo and also from me that the list view should actually be a table. But for the current issue, we have less than 10 minutes left in the hour. So the current issue is dealing with the filter categories. And I think we can at least agree on the following statement. The current layout, the filters take up too much room. And so something has to be done to not show them by default, whether it's to show them in a modal or a details element. We should not display them by default. Does everyone agree on that much? I get 3 thumbs up. I agree with it. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder like if, so, I wonder, I wonder if not shown by default is I don't know if that is the position we should jump to. I mean, I think it is one option, but I think another option could be to just have them like I was saying, have all the filters on the right hand sidebar, but not have the categories list be everything all at once. Like maybe like I have a show more, a bunch of categories. Or it could
Oh,
be RAF as
are
you
you agreeing or
suggested.
disagreeing? I'm saying the categories take up too much room and they should not be shown by default.
See, you can show some of them with like a show see all, see more kind of pattern.
Ah,
I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's another option. So I'm saying there's other ways. Yeah, there's other patterns that could be applied, I think.
okay. So instead of hiding all of them by default, you're suggesting that an alternative is to show some of them by default, but not the complete list.
Yeah.
Okay. And Simo asks in the chat, what does the Drush category tell about C tools on the card?
Yeah, that's related to the previous discussion about if we need those categories displayed on the cards.
Where is the trash category?
On C tools? Yeah, and that is one of the categories. I
Where?
think it means that it provides a Drush command.
Oh, you're using the old categories.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Those
was
are the
using
updated ones.
Okay, so okay. I was using the site by Benji.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Those are got removed. Those are the
Okay.
current ones here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we all agree that the categories take up too much room, and we should do something to hide most or all of them by default. So what's the next question to ask? I guess where to put them? Should they go in the right sidebar, as Aaron suggested? Now, Aaron, are you suggesting that just the categories go in the right sidebar, or all of the filters?
Sorry, I realized I saw my hand up. I think I would put them all in the right sidebar, like have groups for each filter. However, you could literally reduce the development status, maintenance status, and security advisory coverage down to 3 checkboxes. So you could have just a status group with 3 checkboxes and a categories group, and that could be all we need.
I think I kind of like that. Since we have made each of those 3 filters a binary option, why have 3 separate groups for them? Get a thumbs up from Scott.
I think the challenge might be
And
that
from Simo.
there's slightly different behavior. I'm trying to think. So, like, if you had all of those checked, you would get a situation where modules are actively developed, they're actively maintained, and they have security coverage. Which is that the default state
I think
right
so.
now? Okay, and then you add categories, but if you had 1 category, you get the list filtered by that category. If you add more, you get additional categories. I think no, that is the same behavior, isn't it? Because it's adding more. It's an additive filter. Yeah. But then if you remove maintain status, it's I think that's right. Oh,
No. If you check off maintained, that reduces the number of modules shown. If you start with the default state where no categories are selected and you select one, then it also reduces the number of modules shown. But when you check a second one, it increases the number of modules shown.
yes.
So I think that having just the two groups goes a long way to solving that distinction. And we only have a couple of minutes left. Go ahead, Ralph.
I would still rather strongly disagree moving everything in a sidebar and grouping it there. Having everything in an order of first search, then the filter section, and then the results, no matter if you're on mobile or desktop, in particular with that few filter types currently available for Project Browser, and for other source types, it's even less. Therefore, I think I would really keep it chronological. And about the idea, having just a checkbox, for example, for maintained and development status, it's tempting. But on the other hand, if you again compare it to categories, it still is sort of the other way around. And I'm not sure if it's directly comprehensible to the user that way.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think we have consensus that we should move the filter categories, the categories to the other filters. And maybe to Scott's point, we should think of the mobile design first. That those will go together and then have the list of results.
Yep.
And it's certainly worth considering. It would be great to have some user testing, whether to combine the 3 existing filters into one set of checkboxes. And then on a wide screen on desktop, should it be at the top as the current design is, or the right sidebar? Again, that's something that user testing would be good for. I'm not sure. We are at the end of the hour. Any last comments? Okay, I think the proposed resolution is definitely a step in the right direction, and we have some other ideas that are worth considering. Thanks all for coming. Ralph, will you follow up on the issue?
Again, yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you all. See you next week, I hope.
Have a good day, guys.
Nice weekend.
Have a nice weekend.